All right, folks, finally, football on Saturday in Bloomington. The Buckeyes open up against the Hoosiers. We know what happened in Bloomington the last time those two got together on a opening weekend. A struggle for the Buckeyes into the fourth quarter. Then they pulled away behind J.K. Dobbins. We'll see what Saturday has in store. Buckeyes live right here at the Voice of College Football each and every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Sometimes we've got to move it. Therefore, it is imperative to, of course, subscribe, hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. Right next to me, Tony Gerdeman, BuckeyeHuddle.com. Buckeye Weekly is the podcast that is more than weekly. Buckeye Weekly, you got to check it out. And, of course, just follow Tony. You'll see the Twitter handle on the banner, and you can follow him and the rest of the crew there at College Football Playbook. And check out that venture right here on YouTube. Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts 247 Sports, has been a pillar in the industry for decades at this point. Season number, what is this, Steve? Do you even know at this point?
This is my 29th year full-time doing Ohio State football. I did it part-time, just covering a lot of the home games prior to that, all the way back to like 88 or 89. So, yeah, it's 29 years full-time. First year full-time was 95, and it's been a pretty good 30-year run. I mean, you think about all the games and championships and bowls and everything that the Buckeyes have accomplished. This is the golden era of Ohio State football, and we'll see if they can make it even a little bit more golden this upcoming season.
Without Tony, without Steve, and typically Kevin Noon, we don't have a show here, so please show your appreciation. These guys make it roll for us 228 consecutive weeks, and we are happy to be in season now. Tony, Ryan Day, Jim Knowles. I heard from Ryan Day. I did not catch up with the Jim Knowles news conference at this point, but certainly when I look at Jim Knowles, I think most polarizing guy in the state right now. And
I think Gerald McRaney and Admiral Kilbride from NCIS Los Angeles and the husband of Delta Burke. That's what I think of.
There it is. Only Steve would come up with that analogy, but there it is. You guys can let that sink in.
But he's Tony, pissed that they canceled the show.
Tony, your biggest takeaways from yesterday's discussions?
Well, I'm sure we'll spend quite a bit of this show talking about quarterbacks, so I'll leave that for now. I think my biggest takeaway from talking with Jim Knowles is that there's still no decision at free safety, and there's some concern there. Some angst is the word that Jim Knowles used. So it's still down to Jihad Carter, Josh Proctor, and true freshman Malik Hartford. I'm expecting it to be Jihad Carter, but Ryan Day and Knowles have both said that Hartford is going to play. So at some point he'll be out there. We'll see, Josh Proctor maybe in a run support role they were talking about. I just think you've got so many good parts on the defense right now, and they're feeling so good about the corners, the linebackers, the defensive line. Obviously, Sonny Styles at the nickel and Lathan Ransom at the strong safety. The one area where you don't want to have a concern is that last line of defense at free safety, and that's the one area where they do have some concern. Now, you've got some decent options. Like I said, a 3-year starter at Syracuse, Jihad Carter, who they like but has to stay healthy. Josh Proctor has seen a bunch. He's won a job out of fall camp the last 2 years. Hasn't kept the job, but he's won a job. Then, of course, Malik Hartford, who has the higher potential, more potential than either of those guys, but he's still a true freshman. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that transpires and how that evolves over the course of the season. But I think that was the biggest personnel takeaway for me from talking to Knowles.
Steve, biggest takeaways from yesterday?
Oh, there were several. I'll stick with Knowles. I think that they like the defensive line. I think that they've got 3 defensive ends who they are absolutely in love with right now. JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, Kenyatta Jackson, with Caden Curry and maybe even Mitchell Melton all right there in that group. Defensive tackle, I think you got a strong 2-2 there with Tyleik Williams and Mike Hall maybe as the starters, Taiwan Malone, Ty Hamilton as the backups, Jaden McKenzie also in that mix. So I think they're pretty happy about that. I think you're 2-2 at linebacker. You got Eichenberg and Steele Chambers as the starters with CJ Hicks and Cody Simon right there nipping at their heels. They'd start for just about every other Big Ten team. I would think. Simon for sure, and Hicks we just don't know because we haven't really seen an abundance of play. But Simon to me was a guy every time I went to practice was making plays all the time, just kind of stuck in a numbers game there. Corners, you got to be happy with Igbinosun, Hancock, and Burke. Two of the three will be on the field at all times. Sounds like they're going to rotate those guys. And we talked about that on a previous show, how Ohio State's had some pretty good three-man corner rotations in the past that really paid great dividends and kept a fresh guy on the field at all times. So I think that's important. Over on offense, Carson Hinsman has never played a down of college football. I confirmed that with our friend Dan Hope from 11 Warriors, who does the play counts. Before I asked my question of Ryan Day, I turned to Dan Hope and I said, 0 snaps for Carson Hinsman last year. And Dan Hope looked at me and he said 0. So Carson Hinsman's first snap will be the first time the offense goes out against Indiana as the starting center. The rest of the line is what we thought it would be. Donovan Jackson and Matthew Jones at the guards, Josh Simmons at left tackle, and Josh Fryer at right tackle, although he said Luke Montgomery will also play, perhaps even in this game. So if they get up big, they'll put the second-team offensive line in, certainly. And Luke Montgomery and some other guys, maybe even Austin Sierreveld, who I wonder if could be the next, one of the next people up. I think Enoch Vamahi is the next guy up at guard, and Victor Cutler would be the next guy up at center. But I wonder if Sierreveld could also maybe be on that second team. Let's see. Running back, we got a clear pecking order with Travion Henderson, then Mine Williams, then Chip Trianum, then Dallin Hayden, who must be the best fourth-team running back in college football, and then Evan Pryor, who may be the best fifth-team running back in college football. So how are you going to find carries for all five of those guys? I don't know. But, if this game gets out of control, or Youngstown State and Western Kentucky get out of control, then maybe you'll see all five of them get a carry in the same game, which would be kind of unique. But, I think, unlike last year where they were scraping around and didn't have enough bodies to fill the position, now it seems like they've got plenty of help there. And then obviously the quarterback position, which he discussed at great length. He spoke for 37 minutes, Tony, and I would bet 15 to 20 of it was on every conceivable aspect and angle of the quarterback position, including comrade Rob Aller of the Columbus Dispatch. How he loves to sneak those sly questions, but you'd really rather only have one, wouldn't you? Jesus criminy. I mean, yeah, I suppose you would, but you got two. So there you go.
I think your buddy Dave Biddle started the news conference, and Ryan Day.
Well, that was obvious. The first question, whoever was tasked with the first question was going to have to get the quarterback situation out of the way. And Ryan, have you thought, or whatever? That's all he got out of it. Do you have anything? Yes, Dave. And then smiled, and everybody laughed. And I think there was great relief among all of Buckeye Nation that there has been a decision. The Whites, as I said in my trip to the Rotary Club down in Circleville last week, you'll know that it's like the Vatican. The Pope, has been selected. When the white smoke comes out of the chimney there at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, we've got a starting quarterback. So there you go.
Some relief, Tony, but angst elsewhere. So out of that 15 or 20 minutes about quarterbacking and the decision that was made and why and how it's going to play out and the time given to both going forward, at least for this Indiana game, what do you think is the most telling?
For me, in terms of what, like because we can go in a number of different directions, but for me, the thing that was most telling about the last 2 weeks is that Kyle McCord had his back against the wall, and he was on the verge of losing his opportunity to be the starting quarterback at Ohio State, something that he has spent his first 3 years trying to become. And so he saw that leaving, and so he's played his best ball the last 2 weeks, which is exactly when Ryan Day wanted it to happen. He wanted to see somebody respond. He wanted, when we talked to him last week, he said, we asked him what was the tiebreaker, what will the tiebreaker be? And he said, I want to see somebody who can win at the end, somebody who can be backed up at the goal line, somebody who can be, losing in the fourth quarter and still come out and win. And how do you can't figure that out in practice. One way that they have been able to replicate that is with Kyle McCord seeing his future flash before his eyes, basically, and then responding by playing his best football, winning the job for now. And really, that's the best kind of just pressure that these guys can be under. They've tried to pressure him these last 2 weeks, and you've seen one guy rise up a little bit and one guy not rise up as much. So that's my takeaway in terms of how it was won. But I want to see both of them in this game and see them both where the outcome is still in doubt. Now, that will also depend on how well Devin Brown plays this week. Ryan Day said that if things go well this week, then maybe that means he plays in the second quarter. If things don't go well this week, maybe that means he plays in the fourth quarter. This is still an ongoing thing, and neither one of them can take a break right now. You can only ramp it up and increase it. So this week will tell us how much, these next couple of days, today and tomorrow, will basically tell us how much Devin Brown will play, and we'll know kind of how well he played in practice by how early he gets in the game. But even that's going to be dependent on circumstance. And, if Ohio State gets backed up, Indiana punts the first sometime in the second quarter, and that was going to be the time you wanted to throw Devin Brown out there. And now, do you really want to put him out there on 1st and 10 from your own 2-yard line? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe that's a great test, but not if it's 0-0 at that point. And if it's 0-0 at that point, why shouldn't you put him out there? Because you're not moving the ball. So there's a bunch of different factors in terms of how and when and why. But you try to go in with a little bit of a plan, or maybe a decent sized plan, but knowing that can all be thrown out the window just depending on time and circumstance.
Yeah, the usual plan is for the starter to play the first quarter, and then the backup or the next guy would come in maybe on the first series that starts in the second quarter. That's how it's been done a lot of times at a lot of places. Remains to be seen. I mean, by all rights, if that's how it goes, Ohio State could have a 14-3 lead, which would be comfortable and a good place to put him in. I made the point on our podcast yesterday that we filmed right after the announcement that I would tend to doubt that you would see Devin Brown go in a situation where the ball is on the Indiana 5-yard line, to take over after a turnover or a return at the 5-yard line and going in, because you want to make sure you punch that in the end zone. And as Tony said, I wouldn't put him in on Ohio State's own 5-yard line. Here you go, kid. Go out there and don't make a safety, or throw a bad pick six deep in our own end. I would think in the middle of the field, you'd have no qualms with an early lead, 7-3, 10-3, 14-3, 14-0, whatever it could be in the second quarter to put that guy in. So, again, a lot of supposition about how this game is going to go. Ohio State generally beats Indiana like a drum. The only time that didn't happen in recent memory was in the COVID year in 2020, when they had Michael Penix now at Washington at quarterback, and they had a great team. They had their best team in 50 years and were legitimately a top 10 team coming in to play Ohio State. It was 42-35 was the final score, though Ohio State had a huge lead in that game and then let them back into it in the second half. But beyond that, 2 years ago, it was raining in Bloomington. It was 54-7. Last year in Columbus in November, it was 56-14 for Ohio State. And, you can look at all these scores up and down. Ohio State usually beats these guys anywhere from 25 to 35 points. The 56 points that they scored last year is tied for the most that Ohio State's ever scored in a game against Indiana. I think, spread players want to know, is it going to be, they're going to cover the 30 or 31 or whatever it is, or they're not going to. And it's kind of a guessing game when you really think about it, because for Indiana, a guessing game more than it is if this game was played in week 7 and we had a body of work for Indiana, because Indiana has 48 newcomers on its roster, and that's like 36 freshmen and like 22 or 23 transfer portal players, some obscene number of first-year guys on the team. And I tried to do a two deep for Indiana since they thankfully, or not thankfully, regretfully, I don't know, whatever the snarky word for that would be, did not produce one. Ohio State's not going to produce one either. And I'm like, like the guy in Major League, who are these freaking guys? It's like, well, this guy's dead. As our friend Noon would say,
cross him off then.
the list. So, it's anybody's guess who's going to show up and play. They haven't named a quarterback between Taven Jackson, who's a Tennessee transfer, and Brendan Sorsby, who was on the team last year, but I don't think he played. Excuse me. And so there's a lot of that with this Indiana team that, guys that, maybe produced elsewhere, but, Linnell Carr is a defensive end from West Virginia, getting a lot of run. Andre Carter, a defensive end from Western Michigan, who's getting a lot of run. They got a linebacker from Stanford. I mean, they've got guys from all the conferences, probably all 10 Division I conferences are represented on this Indiana roster one way or the other. It's kind of crazy. But so, it's going to take a quarter probably to figure out who's doing what to who, and then try and take advantage of it the best way that you can. But again, as our friend Noon would like to say, nothing beats rock. And if Ohio State lines up and runs the football with Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams and makes it 2nd and 3 and 2nd and 4, then that's going to make life so much easier for Devin Brown and Kyle McCord to just pick and choose their spots and then soften them up and go downtown to Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka, who I'm going to put the over-under combined touchdowns for them 3.5. I'm going to call it 3.5. I think one will have 2, and the other one will either have 1 or 2. So there you go.
When it comes to Tom Allen, you know what they say about desperate times. So desperate measures, grab anyone that has a pulse out there that may be able to help us and save my job. After
one of our other favorite jokes is showing up at the Big Ten kickoff luncheon, making his 7th and final appearance at the Big Ten kickoff luncheon as Indiana coach Tom Allen. He led the Hoosiers to a top 10 season in 2020, but haven't won anything since. So, in the 2 years since. So.
Elio.
4-8 last year. I think he's got to get him to a bowl game to kind of quiet the critics. I think that would be non-conference. I know they're playing Indiana State, Louisville, which has Brom, who was a noted Indiana beater at Purdue, now as their coach. I don't know who their other game is, but they're going to have a tough one to try and get to. They're going to have to beat Rutgers, obviously, and find some wins somewhere along the way.
Do you think next year you're getting rid of divisions? Do you want a new guy to get to deal with that? No longer having to play Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan every year. You just go with a fresh start. Like everything is new, everything is fresh, everything is upbeat. Does Tom Allen will he bring the energy and the enthusiasm to a fan base with all of this newness, or is it like some of this is new, but the rest is still Tom Allen, and it's still maybe like 8 or 9 wins over the last 3 years?
I think the contract situation will dictate that. He's up to almost $5 million a year. So, and that would have come right after the 2020 season. They probably gave him a 5 or 6 year extension after 2020 at $5 million a year. So if he's got 2 more years on that deal, they're going to have to pay him $10 million probably, or $8 million to walk away. If he's got 3 years on that deal, it'd be north of $10 million to get him to leave. So does Indiana, I know they're all playing with Big Ten funny money now with this new Big Ten contract, but does Indiana, which, for whether you like it or not, I mean, they're one of the many Big Ten schools that you can just be accused of collecting the checks that Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State generate for them and not reinvesting completely in their football program. They finally found a coach that they wanted to invest in. I mean, Indiana paying their head football coach $5 million a year. Are you serious? But he earned it with that 1 year. So I don't know. That would dictate it to me probably for them. I think he'll be there, I think, through next year, and then a decision would have to be made if it doesn't get any better.
Just looking over, I forgot that they beat Illinois to start the season. Illinois lost to Indiana and Michigan State last year. That's for as good of a season as they had. Yeah.
That cost them the division. I mean, they should have been, they were as good as anybody in that division last year. I think the West is, pretty wide open. I mean, Illinois got some shoes to fill, including a new defensive coordinator, which defense was their calling card. But, Iowa, Luke Fickell at Wisconsin, if he can put Cincinnati in the playoff, he can definitely win 10 games at Wisconsin, which has done that with every coach they've had back to Barry Alvarez. So I don't see any reason why he can't do it. So,
am I crazy? Am I the only one that's like more excited for the Minnesota-Nebraska game tomorrow night than Florida-Utah? With the injuries to Cam Rising, not knowing what to expect there, and who cares about Florida at this point? Can they do anything? I'm kind of invested in this Big Ten West stuff.
Yeah, Florida is on that scrap heap of schools like Texas, Florida. Florida State had a great year last year, but they've kind of been on that scrap heap in recent years. Texas A&M that, we know how great you were in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and you want to be great so bad, but you're not. So, I don't know.
I've always been a Big Ten West guy. I love that free-for-all, win the division at 6-3. I think Iowa's got the highest floor, and I think Wisconsin's got the highest ceiling. And if Wisconsin can gel a new offensive, defensive coordinator, head coach, and quarterback quickly, then I think that they're going to max out and be the best team in the division by the end of the year. But is that going to be enough? Because they play Iowa at home, but rather early in the schedule. And I think that's the game of the year in a division that has several games of the year, because if it's a free-for-all like it many times is, and certainly was last year, then you've got like 18 games that are pretty important because everybody's got a shot.
Yeah, they'll congeal. I don't have any. You know why I know that? Is because I saw a social media post where Fickell went up to the whiteboard and he put a thing up on the board with the Wisconsin logo, and on one side it said 4-6, and on the other side it said A to B. Wonder where he got that from. 4-6, A to B. Did he invent that for Urban, or did Urban and Mickey invent that for Luke?
Mark, you're talking about the highest floor for Iowa. I probably would agree with that, but their ceiling, it's like the floor and their ceiling is like trying to walk in a crawl space. You're really hunched over dealing with that high floor and that low ceiling for Iowa.
Number 15 is as high as you go and get in the national polls, because as good as you are, there's a loss to Purdue coming right around the corner. So.
Yes, the defense can't give up single digits every week. So, I took in Kirk Ferentz before our Iowa show yesterday, and it shouldn't surprise me. It shouldn't blow my mind, and I can't turn this into an Iowa show, but my goodness, when he says that the evaluation of the offensive coordinator is winning, that's the evaluation of the offensive coordinator. You could go to any bottom 10 offense in the country and talk to their head coach and ask them point blank, is your offensive performance acceptable? Whether that was Georgia State or New Mexico State, and they would say, you know what? No, we need to get better on offense. But no, Kirk Ferentz says it's just fine the way it is. It's acceptable. It's fine, because what matters are the W's. Well, you're not winning national championships. So 7-5, that's acceptable. A winning record, we win. We win the W's. Justify everything else. It's just insane.
Outback Bowl loss to LSU or whoever. Yeah. Whatever.
Back to the Buckeyes. I came to this quarterback conclusion to say, I want to pick apart this decision, but I can't, because it seems like the most reasonable decision that if Kyle McCord has outplayed Devin Brown, if it was neck and neck, and I believe Ryan Day, correct me if I'm wrong, even acknowledged at one point that Devin Brown was surging, that he was looking really good and had possibly taken the lead. But Kyle McCord, the more consistent player in the last 2 weeks in a close race, but a decided edge to Kyle McCord, then this is the best way to approach it, because you've got two quarterbacks who have not been on the stage. It would be one thing if Kyle McCord was fending off Devin Brown as an incumbent who had turned in a 30 touchdown season last year, but he's not. So put him on a stage against a real opponent and give McCord the start, because he earned it on the practice field, but Devin Brown may turn out to be the better player when the lights are on.
Well, and as Ryan Day said, he was asked, because he's been saying like you want to see a sizable gap. And so when they announced this and the question was, well, so what's the gap now? He's like, well, it's big enough to give Kyle McCord to start this week, but it's also not big enough to where you're not going to play Devin Brown. But also Devin Brown has played well enough to earn time, and coaches always talk about guys who are game ready and they've earned it. So we've got to find ways to put them out there. That doesn't always happen. They talk it up all camp long and say, or all week long, yes, we've got to get this guy out there. When the time comes to actually do it, though, during the game, they get a little nervous and they get a little sphinctered up, and they won't pull the trigger on stuff like that. But for this job being as special as it is, if you really want all of the information, and Ryan Day is adamant that you can't know everything about your quarterbacks until you see them playing a game, then you don't want to go into a situation where you're not trying to get all of the information that is out there. So I'm what else are you supposed to do if nobody takes a huge leap and runs away with it in camp? Are you just supposed to ignore the possibility that there might be another starter in the room? So you give both guys an opportunity. You let one fail, and one guy will work out, the other will maybe make some mistakes, and you do it in a way that won't cost you a game. And they've got 3 games to work this out, and I would not expect a second quarterback to play at Notre Dame unless it's some sort of a blowout or some sort of a catastrophe. But you've got 3 games to work with. As they say on Step Brothers, explore the room, go ahead and put your bunk beds in there and just go at it and see what you can figure out there with the quarterbacks, and let Devin Brown play with the first team. I think that's what everybody wants to see as well. Just let them both have the same opportunity with the same guys. Because when we would get to see them in practice with the split fields, I would always see Kyle McCord with the second team offensive line. Devin Brown would have the first team offensive line, and you'd see Kyle McCord basically running for his life. And you're like, how is this fair? But as Day said, like, don't worry, they all got plenty of snaps with the first team offensive line. Don't just base everything you see on what they did with the split field. But I think you got to give them both a shot in games, because Ryan Day keeps talking about you can't know until you see it in the game. So if you want to know, you got to see it in the game.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't have a problem with the way that they're going to handle it. I know it is a little bit unorthodox and maybe a little bit wonky, but it is kind of a soft launch. I mean, Indiana, we debated this at the beginning, could give them a game, or they may not give Ohio State a game. We honestly don't know. I'm leaning more toward the fact that they won't. If we believe Ohio State's defense is improved and Indiana is starting a redshirt freshman who's never played at quarterback, never played much, few throws here and there maybe, that's not a recipe. Even against a bad Ohio State defense, that's not a recipe for success. I mean, last year's Ohio State defense would have chewed that kind of team up and spit them out. So now if we're thinking they're even better, where are the points going to come from for Indiana? I mean, are you going to score 14 maybe? Ohio State scores 45, 50 just falling out of bed, and it doesn't really matter who the quarterback is a lot of times. And if Indiana can't stop the run and Ohio State piles up 250, 300 yards rushing and controls the ball all day long, then, it's going to be a short game and a lopsided game for Ohio State. And, Ohio State went on the road last year. This kind of reminds me of the game at Michigan State, where they just went in there and played a perfect half of football almost in the first half and just demolished them. And, people left at halftime. People are like, well, how many Ohio State fans are going to be at Indiana? And I'm like, well, it's the first game and they probably have 45,000 season ticket holders, whatever. So maybe 40,000 of them will be there. The other 15,000 will be Ohio State people. They haven't given up on Indiana football yet, for this season. Usually about late October, if not earlier, the thump, thoughts come along with basketball. But, right now, they're still optimistic and hopeful that they'll have something there to root for. So, it may not be the big Ohio State outpouring that you normally see, but tickets are still pretty affordable. I think if you want to go and get in, it's like $50-$60. Anybody who's got nothing to do, it's Labor Day weekend, take off and go. But, all things being equal, quarterback situation, I'm good with it. And as Tony said, I want to see Devin Brown get the opportunity with the first team, and then you will know what you have, I think, a little bit more than you do right now.
Have both of you unveiled your final predictions?
I haven't. We were talking at lunch yesterday, and I said I'm kind of in that realm of 49-14 or 42-14. Somewhere in there. So probably leaning more toward 49-14 is what I would think. I don't know. But Indiana, to me, seems like they're in a state of flux. And maybe when this thing takes root in a month and everybody knows each other's names and everybody understands the scheme and, all this, then maybe they're able to play some competitive football. But my experience is that this isn't even an all-star team. I was going to say an all-star team of guys from different places. It's not even an all-star team. It's just guys, warm bodies that they could find, a couple of guys who played good in the MAC, a couple of guys, who did this as a backup at Texas Tech or, wherever, different places. I mean, it's a ragtag group of guys. I hope Indiana does well. I'm not rooting for them to fail in the course of the season. It's just hard to see it. I mean, it just when Ohio State's recruiting top 5 classes year after year after year, the material that they have is just so much better across the board than anything Indiana can put on the field. So I don't know.
So are the predictions for this? Are the predictions for the season unveiled? And before you answer that, do you guys feel pressure because people are counting on your predictions? They're waiting. And then obviously you're not writing for Purdue or Kansas State where you can just mail in I'm going to be an optimistic 8-4 or whatever, and no pressure. And maybe a few people get mad because they think Kansas State's better than that, and they should go 10-2 and win. Or, I'm picking Purdue to go 4-8 because no, and you get the fan base a little riled up. But we're talking people that national championship or bust. We're waiting for your prediction. You better get it right. If you didn't pick us to win the national championship, then what's wrong with you? Oh, you did pick us to win the national championship. You're a homer, and that was going to be your pick anyway. And then I'll let you know where I stood on this and where I pulled the trigger.
Go ahead, Steve.
I'm thinking 13-0. I'll do a column that comes out Friday. I'm thinking 13-0. They've got the most talented team in football other than Georgia, it seems, or right there with Georgia. So I'm thinking in that range. But again, I do want to look over a few more things. It's not that I think that they're due to beat Michigan or anything, that I'm not giving Michigan credit for anything that they've done, which, they deserve tremendous credit. These were the best 2 seasons Michigan's had. Back to, 06 was really good and 16 was good, but the best 2 seasons in a row that Michigan's had back to the 90s, when they won the national championship. So, I believe in what Ohio State can put on the field. I just see there's so much talent there, and talent is a word, like JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer at this high end, Bosa type talent potentially. Tommy Eichenberg is a grinder. He's not Ryan Shazier, in terms of freak type player. And so they have all aspects of star, so to speak, between the grinders who are stars because they work so hard, and the Tuimalouas, the Sawyers, the Marvin Harrisons, who are freaks, who are stars because they also work so hard. So there's a lot of talent on this team, top to bottom, side to side. And so, Travion Henderson, if he stays healthy, we saw some plays in the 2 days that we got to go. He gets the ball in the open field. It's 50 yards, drop of a hat. And good luck. I hope you've got an angle on him, because if you don't, it's 75. So, they've got the potential to really do some special things this year. That's my feeling.
Yeah, they're the most talented team they'll see until December 31st or January 1st or whatever it might be. They're going to be favored in every game. The only game they aren't favored in right now is Michigan, and I think that's a 2.5 point line. So I expect it'll fluctuate at some point throughout the season. But this is their 4 games that they can lose, 4 matchup games, as the coaches like to say. It's at Notre Dame, at Wisconsin, at Michigan, and the Penn State game at home. And if you want to ignore the Purdue game at your own peril, feel free to do that. Sometimes Ohio State has ignored it at their own peril, and we've seen what has happened there. But I've not put any predictions down. I think there's a part of me that thinks 10-2 is more likely than 12-0, but 11-1 is probably the most likely regular season thing. I feel confident that Michigan is going to lose at Penn State, but I could see those 3, Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan, all just beating each other. And then who knows how that all shakes out with a tiebreaker. So no, I have not put any prediction down. When I do that, and I don't always necessarily do it. I'm not really concerned what other people think, because I have enough of a track record of picking against Ohio State. So if somebody calls me a homer for picking Ohio State to win, it's like, do you realize Ohio State wins at like a 90% clip? So picking them to win something is not really being a homer. It's just like, well, they generally almost always win. So why would you pick against them? And I think the math is on my side with that one. But this is a national championship caliber team, and with national championship goals. Every time they've won a major recognized national championship, they've done it with a new starting quarterback, and they've got that one this year. So there's every reason to think that they will be in the hunt, but matchup games have not gone well for Ryan Day of late. And so they've got to turn a corner on that, make the plays that need to be made. And defensively, that's been the issue since 2019 when they were fantastic. Every year since, they just can't get it figured out. So what happens if they do get it figured out? And if they do get it figured out, then I think a lot of teams are in trouble. But you still have to also score in the red zone and stop teams from scoring in the red zone. So I think there's enough there to be playoff bound for sure. It's just the week-to-week road games that they have, I think, are concerns. They're talented, more talented than everybody they'll face, but that's been the case for their last 2 games against Michigan, and we've seen what's happened.
Yep. I liked your comment last week or the week before that it's more likely that they'll go 12-0 than it is that they'll go 10-2, with 11-1 being probably most likely of all. To my recollection and understanding, if they all end up 11-1 and 1-1 against each other, I think, after, you sort through all the tiebreakers and everything, this honest to goodness could come down to who played the 3 Western Division teams with the best Big Ten combined record. That way you get credit for beating, because you're all playing the same Eastern Division opponents. The other Eastern Division opponents are all the same. They look at the record of your Western Division opponents, I presume, in Big Ten play. And this is one that favors Ohio State because they're playing Wisconsin, who's picked to win the division, Minnesota, who's also picked in the top 2 or 3, and Purdue, who won the division last year. So, it figures to be, anywhere from 3rd to 5th probably this year. to my way of thinking, that tiebreaker would favor Ohio State if it came down to that. But you certainly do not want to leave it to the merits of a tiebreaker of your Western Division opponents. You want to go 12-0, 9-0, and pack your bags and head off to Indianapolis.
It should favor Ohio State. Off the top of my head, I know Penn State's got Iowa and Illinois. So those two, I don't know what the other. Of course, if somebody's got Northwestern, that's really going to weight it down.
That's a killer.
So I don't know off the top of my head.
Sorry, sir, it did not fall your way this year.
And Michigan's got Minnesota, Nebraska, and I think they've got Northwestern.
Penn State has Northwestern.
Penn State's got Northwestern, but they also have Iowa, Illinois. Okay. Yeah. So if you put those three together, it sounds like Steve's on it with Ohio State having most likely.
There was a league, the Big 12 years ago with that whole Texas Tech snafu. We all remember that 2010, 2011, whatever year that was. They threw it up to the BCS rankings. And I'm like, how can you do that? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. But because first of all, those weren't coming out till like Monday or Tuesday. So
exactly,
it's like, how the hell would you know who's getting in? The flip of this is Michigan is playing East Carolina, UNLV, and Bowling Green in the non-conference. They don't deserve any kind of consideration, for that. Penn State, they're playing West Virginia. That's their big game. Ohio State's playing Notre Dame, who is going to be in the top 10 based on what Sam Hartman did in dismantling Navy over the weekend. I was playing golf during that, so I was trying to keep tabs on Peacock with it, and I saw 14-0 after the first period, 28-0 at halftime, and I went, that's enough of that. So really didn't watch one play of it, but I heard Bruce Feldman was on the late Fox game, I think the San Diego State OU game at halftime, and made the comment that Notre Dame finally has a quarterback. And who was their last great quarterback that, was a difference maker? Maybe Deshaun Kaiser. I don't even know. So somebody who put fear in the other team, because he's going to go out and throw for 300 or 400 yards every week. So
this is probably the first guy that has a shot of playing in the NFL since Brady Quinn.
Yeah.
Well, Jimmy Clausen was supposed to be that guy.
Yeah.
He was supposed to be that good.
Yeah.
Well, Deshaun Kaiser wasn't like a second or third round pick.
Yeah.
And the Browns went with Kaiser for 1 year, I think, but whatever.
But even Brady Quinn did just a bunch of dinking and dunking in that Charlie Weiss offense. And
yes.
That's a long time ago. We don't need to.
Evan showing up, making a grand entrance.
Sorry, I was recording another. I'm very popular these days.
You're a man in demand.
It reminds me of.
Maybe it's apropos that we lost your audio. I don't know.
Try again, Kevin.
What did you say?
I just changed it back. I was going to say, just like back when I was in college, popular with the ladies.
Yes. Well, we're obviously not popular with you, but here we go.
I can leave. I double booked. It was on me. I had to record a season preview, and I was promised 30 minutes, and it went 47 minutes. So,
but it's the Indiana game, Kevin.
I know, and I was just looking. I just saw somewhere that had it at 29.5, which I like better than 30. So, I was very curious about that. Not to step on any toes or anything that's been said, but Indiana 23 transfers into the program. I think only about 5 of them are out of Power 5 or whatever. We don't know who the kicker is, so I'm probably going to have to sit there and take Indiana in the points because that I can't deal with that type of gamesmanship.
That's pretty much says it all right there.
I was
Before
asking
I
these
lay
two
any
for
money
their-
down, I need to know who the kickers are. That is my one rule. I need to know.
There
who's
was one
kicking.
yesterday. Jaden Fielding is going to be the kicker instead of Parker Lewis, who hit about 80% of his field goals in his 2 years at USC. I had him figured to win that job, but Fielding apparently more consistent during preseason camp, and they decided to go with him.
Shouldn't a winner get the scholarship?
I would think Lewis is on scholarship by now, isn't he?
Yeah, but I'm saying, shouldn't Jaden Fielding get that scholarship? I mean, he was the walk-on kickoff guy last year. Although they're all cryptic about who is and who isn't on scholarship.
Yeah, you don't know. Yeah, they keep it pretty hush hush over there at the Ohio State College. They're real tricky.
We've got Debo Ray making a bold prediction here at 15-0 for the Buckeyes. Kyle wins the Heisman. Well, not if he has to sit out a bunch of series in favor of Devin Brown. Maybe that's going to cost him. But 52-3 over the mighty Hoosiers.
Oof.
Yeah,
I feel pretty good about Ohio State's chances of winning this game by a pretty sizable margin, but I don't know if I'm going to give 49 points or anything like that. If Ohio State goes 15-0, what kind of numbers do we see out of Marvin Harrison Jr.? I mean, might throw a couple bucks on him for the Heisman, even though we know it is a quarterback award, not a receiver award.
Yeah,
some of us
Devontae
already got
Smith.
Marvin Harrison at 60-1. So,
Ooh, wow, that's worth 10 to win 600. Sure,
that's exactly what I did.
it is. It is. Kevin, we were at the point where I was trying to get these two to cough up season-long predictions.
Have they coughed up their predictions yet?
I said leaning on 13-0.
Yes, there was a lot of leaning and thinking.
Leaning on 13-0. So what are they going to skip the playoffs out of decency to allow others to go?
I only get them into the playoff. I don't predict the playoff. That's
so much
too
about
hard.
matchups at that point. I agree with Steve there. People are going to be quick to point out that in my 5,000 years of covering this team, I probably don't pick a whole lot of losses in these types of situations. I think 2011 probably was the one year where I did, and it was warranted. I'm between 12-0 and 11-1 in terms of the regular season, as Ohio State does have the number 9 schedule in the nation, according to one of the analytic services. I'm trying to find out where that loss is. And with much deference to Michael Campbell, the crazy Notre Dame fan, I don't see Ohio State losing to Notre Dame. Certainly not going to lose either of their other non-conference games. So, for all the doomsayers that are saying this team's going to lose 2 or 3 games, okay, you got Michigan at the end of the year at Michigan. Ohio State's on a 2-game losing streak. So I'm not going to get all over somebody who picks Ohio State to fall in that game. But where's the other one coming? Wisconsin with the first-year head coach within that system trying to turn a cat into a dog. I think that might be a little bit difficult. Everybody's certainly in love with Penn State and what Penn State can do, yet we don't know who their starting quarterback is. Spoiler alert, Drew Aller. Or, the annual or a semi-annual trip to Purdue, to Ross-Ade Stadium, the House of Horrors for the Buckeyes. I'll say, just because it's so hard to go undefeated, I'll say 11-1.
Can't believe you're picking them to lose to Michigan.
I didn't say which game. I don't put that on me, Ricky Bobby.
I'm not a which game guy either, in terms of, people try to pin you down. I just lay it out there. So I kind of stuck my neck on the line because I released a power rankings, which basically says these are the 25 best teams in the country right this second. And I put Ohio State at number 4. But this is not December 31st. So I'm making a bit of a projection. And I think Michigan's got a higher floor. We were talking floors and ceilings a couple minutes ago. I do think Michigan has less questions. We've been through it a zillion times. You guys know what those are. I just don't. I think Michigan is rock solid and Ohio State's, but I am going to trust the defensive development under Jim Knowles. I'm going to trust that they made the right decision at quarterback. And if they didn't, that's going to be self-evident in the first 3 games. And then he switched to the other guy, Devin Brown, all of those things. And I just think there's going to be upward trajectory. I'm picking this team to win a national championship.
Oh my goodness. There you go.
And I haven't done that like in 6 years. So people were jumping on me as soon as, oh, you're a homer. Okay, I went back. A lot of playoff appearances, a lot of national championship game appearances, a few of those. But I went back at least 5 or 6 years, and I couldn't find a national championship pick out of me.
So is that with a loss to Michigan? Are you saying Ohio State is going to lose to Michigan as well, Mark?
No, they win the tiebreaker, an 8-1 tiebreaker. They go to Michigan and win. They peak at the end. They go to Michigan and win.
So they trip up against Penn State?
Well, Kevin, I'm going to use your line. They trip up somewhere at Wisconsin, Penn State.
Open the season with a loss to Indiana, you're saying? That's what you're telling me?
Rutgers is a tough out.
Yes. If they lose to Indiana Saturday, nobody come after me. I'm going to say, hey, my pick's still in order, still in line. So that's where we go with that. Anything out of the Jim Knowles and Ryan Day appearances at the podium, Kevin, that struck you?
My favorite moments were starting off the press conference when Steve's coworker, Dave Biddle, had the first question and, of course, asked about the starting quarterback. Are you ready to name one? And Ryan Day very emphatically said, yes, Dave. So I enjoyed that. And then I also enjoyed when Jim Knowles was asked a question in regards to the quarterback situation and thought that we were trying to Jedi mind trick him a little bit and had to talk to SID Jerry Emig to make sure that something had been announced and that we weren't trying to trick him there. But, kind of getting away from the lighter moments, I certainly would feel, a little bit more confident about where things are if we would have gotten an announcement on how the secondary may shape up for starters. But, as I just sat there and did a big preview, I think that they got plenty of guys that can fill these roles. And just because you play one doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be out there during the biggest plays of the game. Just, that's going to be something that we'll have to kind of figure out.
I think something fun to watch will be just play to play where number 6 is for Ohio State. Not the quarterback, but on defense, Sonny Styles, watching where he is, lining up initially at nickel and then on passing downs where it's, where maybe Jordan Hancock slides into nickel and Davison Igbinosun goes to corner. Where does Sonny Styles go from there, whether it's deep safety or a linebacker or wherever? So I think that's one of the things I'll be watching for, is just seeing all of the different things they have Sonny Styles doing. And then the effectiveness of whatever it is those things are.
Yep, I agree with all that. I want to see all this youth and Carnell Tate making his debut at wide receiver. I think that'll be interesting, no doubt. See if he can spark some big plays as a true freshman in his debut, especially coming off, such a terrible tragedy, losing his mom. He's just been stoic and kept a stiff upper lip and just channeled all of his energy into getting ready for this season, and has impressed everybody with his maturity and how he handled it. So I think that's interesting on one hand. And again, I'm not going to say they're going to be run heavy, but I do believe they're going to try and establish the run and make Indiana defend the run first and create second and short, third and short situations for the quarterbacks. I think that only makes sense. Xavier Johnson is kind of a do-it-all type weapon who can get some carries and also catch the ball. We saw him make plays again in the passing game in the practices that we got to go to. So I had somebody in one of my chats say they gave Xavier Johnson the 0 number. Does that mean, or block O more appropriately, does that mean they're going to play him a lot? And does that take away snaps from the better wide receivers? I'm like, You might want to check yourself before you wreck yourself, because Xavier Johnson caught a touchdown in the Notre Dame game that turned that game, and he caught one against the best team you've played in many, many moons in Georgia in the or the semifinal. And he can play against anybody. He can play on my team. I'll say that.
Absolutely. Well, any games of interest in the Big Ten that spark your interest, Steve, since you brought up the topic? I'll run down a few maybe of note. Minnesota and Nebraska, of course, a division game on Thursday night. And
Matt Rule
there, if you're looking for an
making
upset.
his debut. Yeah,
Yes.
I don't know about an upset.
If you're looking at an upset, maybe Toledo, Illinois. That might be your game.
Definitely. Toledo's got a good team. Illinois in a state of flux, losing the defensive coordinator and the running back who was kind of the backbone of the team. Michigan, East Carolina without Jim Harbaugh, not being there. What happens with that? East Carolina, nobody seems to be giving them any kind of count, but they play in the American. They play, this isn't like a Sun Belt West team or Conference USA team coming in there. It's a pretty good team. So
I would like to have seen last year's East Carolina team. They lost 2,000-yard receivers, a 1,500-yard running back, and a quarterback with a 28-5 TD to pick ratio. So they've pretty much had to gut the offense.
Was it Michigan State plays Eastern Michigan? Is that right?
Central
Michigan. That could be a tough one for Michigan State. I mean, sometimes they screw around with those MAC teams. Penn State, West Virginia used to be a rivalry, back in the 70s and 80s, but they haven't played since 1992. Is Drew Aller all he's cracked up to be? We're going to find out right out of the gate, because, West Virginia in the Big 12 is probably a 5-7, 6-16 at best, and they're going to be able to defend the pass, you think? So we'll see. We'll see, how he holds up in that one. I mean, it's at home, so it helps. But this week's slate is okay. I mean, there's only one matchup of ranked teams all the way across the country, LSU and Florida State. So it's kind of the appetizer week before we get into the main courses in the weeks to come.
Tony, anything that interests you?
Big Ten wise, Coastal Carolina at UCLA, late night Saturday, getting back to the hotel after the Indiana game. Watching some Big Ten after dark. I'm definitely looking forward to that. Cracking open a couple of pops.
But will the mountains be blue?
And it'll be 2017 the third quarter, and Chip Kelly will just be over there grinding. Oop, we threw a pick,
I'm excited about Sunday, Northwestern and Rutgers, just because I'm getting to watch some Big Ten football on a Sunday at that point. And what does post Pat Fitzgerald Northwestern look like? And can Rutgers capitalize on a situation against a team that is going to be in really bad shape? And Rutgers is almost a touchdown favorite, 6.5 with an over under of 39.5 in that one. So I may have to do a shot a point.
Yeah, week one, and it's already a must-win for both Northwestern and Rutgers. Two terrible teams last year, both missed bowl games. And the winner, comes out of there thinking, well, we might get the 6 wins. And the loser comes out of there saying, no freaking way we're going to get the 6 wins. So, or very, very limited way we're going to have a chance to get the 6 wins. Who is the quarterback at Rutgers? Is it
Gavin Wimsatt, most likely?
It's not Artur Sitkowski anymore.
Simon.
Gary Nova.
He's kind of the default Rutgers quarterback. He's the only one that
Gavin Wimsatt.
Functional.
Gary Nova was my Jack Cohn. I had to years ago had to delete all of my tweets about him because they were just so nasty. It was just very, very mean about poor college kid.
Johnny Langdon.
Well, that one, but Gavin Wimsatt, I mean, that was a recruiting win. That was a big time, top 150 quarterback where, he's athletic and stuff. So you would hope that he eventually becomes something. So I think this is his third year there, and so maybe this is the year we'll see.
I mean, I think if you teleport him into a different system with different pieces around him, I think we're talking about him in a much more positive light. I know a lot of programs highly coveted Gavin Wimsatt, and he decides to go to Rutgers, and well, he's getting the full Rutgers experience,
which is not recommended for anybody.
No, he disrespected the Bing.
I know I'm way out of order on this one, but I'm going to throw this out real quick because Steve Dace yesterday hit me with on the Michigan podcast that the Big Ten crew came through for their one-day look, the Big Ten Network crew with their one-day look on the Buckeyes. I was not aware, I didn't watch it this year, that they were highly critical of the offensive and defensive lines not looking like Ohio State offensive and defensive lines. And I said, well, I didn't watch the show, I didn't see it, but I'm thinking that maybe they had some valid points on the offensive side that I am a bit concerned about the tackle position, but the defensive line, they're either going to be good or they're going to be great. There's just so much talent all over the place that defensive lines, I just wanted to elevate to Wrecking Crew, Clemson 2018 kind of status for the defensive line, but they seem to be disappointed there.
Yeah, well, they can go ahead and criticize the defensive line at your own. I think at your own peril. I think they'll be okay there. That was practice 8 of 25 practices when the Big Ten Network was there. So that was maybe Josh Simmons' 4th or 5th, 6th practice. First full week at left tackle, and obviously Carson Hens has been there since the spring. But 17 practices since that one. I think things have gotten better on the offensive line. I think it's still a concern. But it is remarkable if you look at the parallels between Ohio State's offensive line and Michigan's offensive line, where both teams had to go into the portal to grab a left tackle who didn't play left tackle for their respective team last year, starting a new center, going into the portal, looking for a center. Both teams grab somebody. Questions about the right tackle, but you're confident that you've got somebody there with experience, 2 established guards. Like the same situation is for both teams. They had to go and do the same thing. Now, the Joe Moore Award winner in the past 2 years, you expect everything to materialize there for them, and they have 10 different guys that they can plug in. I think Jim Harbaugh has already said they're going to start a left tackle and right tackle in the first game, and then a different left tackle and right tackle in the second game, which gives you an idea of their depth. But it also tells you they're still looking for answers on the offensive line.
Yeah, that's a new one on me. I mean, I got the McNamara McCarthy thing last year. That made sense that McNamara got one last farewell start before we put the real quarterback in.
All right. Appreciate everybody being here. We do this each and every Wednesday. Typically got schedules to work out, and we always have to wait on Kevin to see if he's going to be able to work things out for that.
Nobody's going to want to talk to me prior to Youngstown State, I promise.
All right. We think we'll be back here next Wednesday, but that's why you subscribe and hit the bell for the notifications. Tony, where can we find you?
BuckeyeHuddle.com. You can find us there every day. Also, the Buckeye Weekly podcast, dropping about 4, 5, or 6 a week at this point. Now that the season is going.
Steve.
Bucknuts.com and Steve Hellwagon, as you can see right there on the screen on Twitter. Going to have game data page probably up sometime today, and then picks for the weekend, 5 days of football tomorrow, and a column probably on Friday with my deep thoughts on the season. And Saturday, getting up bright and early, I'm going to go to the Bell Fountain Licking Heights game on Friday night with Tavian St. Clair, the quarterback who's committed to Ohio State. Going to check him out. That is about 10 minutes from my house here on the far east side of Columbus. And then getting up at 7 in the morning on Saturday and throwing ourselves into the mercy of the traffic on the way to Bloomington. Probably making my 30th trip to Bloomington between basketball and football, and it's still 1957 there, which is kind of neat. and to kind of step back in time a little bit every time you go to the state of Indiana. But other than downtown Indianapolis, which is fabulous, but otherwise, it's kind of a vintage, as I say, a step back in time every time you go to the state of Indiana. Wishing one day that our federal government will extend the Eisenhower interstate highway system to the state of Indiana. That would be great. And looking forward to the game. I mean, it's a unique opener. Ohio State struggled the last two Big Ten openers on the road, season openers, and can they jump on this team early and put them out of their misery? That's what everybody's looking to see.
I don't know if Kevin's earned his $1.37 for this edition to be able to promote his stuff here. Kevin.
You can find me over at BuckeyeHuddle.com. You can find me on the Big Meat Kickoff podcast. Plan on doing a live show on Friday. It's football season. Tail of the tape dropping later today. I don't remember what time I plugged it in for. First one of the season, always difficult because you have no tape to tell the tale from. So more of a stream of consciousness notes about the upcoming game. I think it's going to drop at 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm not exactly sure. Even if I've scheduled it later, I'll make sure that it drops at 1 p.m. Eastern. And you can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Noon.
Tail of the tape, everyone, 1 p.m. Eastern. Get there. All right, guys. Appreciate it. Enjoy the trip. Enjoy the game.
Yep.
Thanks.
We'll see you next time.